That will never work. You can't push that. Seriously? Don't. Oh my God, that's another thing you can do. That's bad. You probably should find other hobbies. You ever learn how to stop? Be happy. You don't bother me. I've seen better people. Do you really want to do that? And my third grade, give it up. Welcome to Horrible Writing, the rawest, most candid, in-your-face writing show on the interwebs because none of us have time to suck. Let's do this. Welcome to episode 68 of Horrible Writing. I'm your host, Paul Sading. And with me today, somebody I've wanted to talk to for a while, just because I really enjoy how they came on the scene and what they do now that they are on the scene. And I came late into the game of their release of the show. Who I have is writer, author, audio dramatist JV Torres. You may know him. If you don't, you will know him from the audio drama, The Rise of King Asilas. JV, welcome to Horrible Writing.
Hey, Paul, thank you for inviting me.
I'm very happy to have you here. I do have to make a guilty admission, though. Now that we're doing the public portion and not the Patreon exclusive, I have to say this to the public. For the longest time, I had to practice your audio drama's name once I knew you were coming on the show. I had to practice the name. For some reason, I am determined to call him Asilius. I don't know why. I have no idea why.
Well, you know, it's one of the funny things is when people audition for it's one of the things that I ask they do is they just kind of listen to at least one episode so they know how to pronounce the king's name.
Yeah.
So that when they submit an audition and they completely botch his name, I know right away that they didn't listen to it.
They didn't take the time to do the. Hey, you know what? That's actually a good filter.
But it's not a deal breaker by any means. I've casted some voice actors even though they hadn't heard the show.
Well, yeah, there's some talent out there. You just can't. You got to give them a little bit of forgiveness. Yeah,
sure, man. You got to give a little.
It is a very interesting show, especially in the current climate. We are recording this, folks, in December of 2018. You will actually hear this in the new year, January 2019. But I'm pretty much going to go Nostradamus here. The world's pretty much guaranteed to be as screwed up then as it is now. So I want to leave you with that little teaser about JV's show. We'll talk about it later in the interview because I think it's one of the neatest things happening out there in audio drama. So, JV, we did some chatting offline and tried to discuss a topic that you could be comfortable talking to here that would be helpful for other writers who are tuning in, listening into the show. And you proposed one to me that I thought, yeah, we got to run with that because I'm a bleeding empath at heart. I really, sometimes it manifests in anger and rage and yelling, but it comes from the place of me feeling for other people. And when you proposed this, I was like, yes, we've got to do this. Other people have to hear it from his perspective. So you mentioned being raised in an environment with low expectations, and I was hoping you could kind of give us JV's backstory on that. What was that environment? What did it look like for you? Because we all ground our perspective in the journey that we've walked, and we make assumptions about people based on that. And I would like my audience to be able to relate to where you came from before we get to talking about who you are today and what you're creating.
Sure, Paul. Thanks. Well, I'm Mexican-American, more affectionately known as Chicanos, right? I'm a Chicano, a true Chicano, born and raised in the United States, Mexican parents. It's one thing, Paul, and I could speak to this quite openly now because I work in the public school system, and as a teacher in public schools, you know, one of the things we try to convey to students is, you know, you have to try to do the best you can, your full potential in all the work that you do. That's a common theme in American culture, and whenever you come across a family or a person who that has low expectations, and it's kind of like it's kind of like they stand out like a sore thumb. Mm-hmm. But in my culture, where I come from, it's not frowned upon necessarily, And it's actually something that's quite prevalent where in my upbringing, where school really was kind of a secondary thing. It wasn't really like a major deal. I was the youngest of eight, and I was the only one to graduate high school and go on to college. So, and a lot of my friends growing up going to school, I mean, a lot of them quit school in high school if they got to high school. They were already popping out two, three kids by the time they were 18 years old, including people in my own family.
Hmm.
So the expectation was more like, once you become of age, you go ahead and you knock somebody up, you get a job, doing something in labor, something in the labor force, and you try to try to work your way through it, buy your six pack of beer at the end of the week, and that was really how things rolled, and where I come from, and that was kind of what was everyone around me was doing. But there was just no way. I mean, I knew from a very young age that there was just no way I was going to live that life. There was
Yeah,
just
well,
no way.
that's what I wanted to ask you because as you were telling that, I was curious to know where that crossroads was for you. How young were you when you had that realization?
I mean, I credit my mother. She passed away last year, but my mother was probably the most influential person in my life growing up. I mean, obviously, like most people, um, she would tell me, look around you, look at the people around you, look at people in our own family, look at your brothers, etc. Do you want to be like them? Do you want to be like them? And they're all like drunk, or they're all acting wild and crazy and doing all these crazy things. And from a very young age, I was like, I don't, I saw all the chaos, and I saw all the fighting and the violence, and I just like, nah. I just inside instinctively, I think innately, I've always known from the time I was a baby, I think, that there was just no way. And my mother always tried to cultivate that in me. And I think that was the major difference in my life, to
Mhm.
go ahead and complete my schooling, and to go on and do all the things that I've been doing.
That is awesome. The more these interviews I do, the more obvious it becomes or reinforces that message about having that foundation. There's always somebody in the personal story of a writer that I'm talking to who if it weren't for that person, the writer would have ended up more than likely ended up somewhere completely different from where they were today. So that's cool to hear that you had that. I'm kind of curious I don't know um what your experience was like in your formative years, but the impact on your psyche. The reason I ask that, when I was a young man, like many young men, we are angst ridden and we want to take on the world because we can, and we've got testosterone falling out of our nose, and we dare
Sure.
somebody to challenge us. But I came from a different world than you. I mean, my parents provided stability, and we had mediocre success as a family. I didn't have any high achievers by any stretch of the imagination, but it definitely wasn't a world where education wasn't reinforced and whatnot. So I'm trying to put myself in your position and what that must have been like on young JV, and how what he went through formulated who I'm talking to today.
Well, because here's the thing, Paul. My mother was the loving and the caring and the nurturing parent. But my father was the realist. And my father said, in spite of all of this niceness and, all these great ideas, the real world that I lived in was a very violent world.
Hmm.
And so my father wanted to prepare me for that. And one of the things he did, I mean, I'm talking about, I probably was still in diapers. And, my brothers all were boxers. My father was a boxer from very, very early age. There was this dichotomy in my life where I had the one side of me that wanted to be an intellectual. I mean, from a little kid, and the other side of me that was like I had to put gloves on and I had to go in the ring and I had to fight. I had to literally box. I had to physically get in the ring, and they would deliberately put in kids who were bigger than me, and they literally would beat me up. Right. And I remember one time, Paul, I was literally in the ring, and I just took a beating, right? And I was crying in the corner, and I was looking at my brother, who's that's actually in town right now, crying, and I'm tearing up, and I'm looking at him. And I'm like, why? Like, why are you doing this to me? Why are you putting me in this situation where I have
Hmm.
to? I'm getting beat up. And my brother says to me, because if you can stay in this ring with that kid who's that much bigger than you, anybody who's your own size, you can take them.
Hmm.
And so that was that was a lesson that I had to learn. It's like you have to learn to get beat up too in order to in order to like grow as a fighter. And like there was these two worlds that I lived in. It was the world where I had to be a fighter physically because I was in a rough neighborhood and I was gonna get into a fight. It was going to happen and it did happen. And then there was this other world where like I have another fight I want to do, and the fight is on the intellectual level.
Hmm.
It's the fight was at the academic level at the school. The fight that had to do with discrimination, because I was Hispanic and I lived in the deep south of Florida, and back in those days, it was black and white, man. It was you had the rednecks and you had the blacks, and there was no place for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so there was all this really this all this chaos and havoc around me, at least in my mind. It was um it was a battle on all fronts, really.
Right. That's remarkable. I mean, it really is. When you look at, we can only test it against, people in your situation. So with the rest of your family, like your brothers, are they, or your siblings, I should say, are they all pretty much wi- holding the same perspective that you do when it comes to this? That the fighting in the physical sense, or the spirit of fighting, and then the intellectual. Because I thought that was a really interesting uh, combination. Not many people could pull that off. So I'm just curious if your family, or if there's something, I don't want to say exceptional because you'll probably get humble on me, but something exceptional about how you dealt with all that.
Look, the raised every time I turned around. Like my brother Johnny went on to become a world. He actually fought the world champion.
Oh, cool.
My brother Johnny Torres fought Ray Boom Boom Mancini. I think it was in '81 or '82, Las Vegas at the Caesar Palace on live television. He got knocked out, but the next day at school, like everybody saw the fight because he was the hometown hero.
Right.
So when your brother is a boxing champion, he was a state champion, he was a celebrity, and he just fought the world champion, and everyone in school is like knows you're a boxer. I mean, I couldn't tell you how many kids wanted to fight me, Paul, just because.
Oh, yeah.
Just
Yeah.
because they wanted to say, "Oh, that's Johnny's brother. He's a boxer too. Let's see what he's got." I
Yeah.
mean, I mean, this happened on almost weekly for me. It was. I was doomed.
Yeah. Yeah. I can imagine. Again, that young male testosterone can lead us to do some silly things. It really can. So
Yeah.
in this development, and I'm trying to set this all up for stuff we're going to talk about here in a second, but in this early life development, is there a moment now that you look back on when you were maybe at a crossroads, or simply you were aware enough that you saw what other people, where they got to start in life compared to where you got to start in life? And was there anything in that experience that has left you with regrets? And you may not have regrets as an adult. You may, not live like that, and that's fine too. But as a talking point to try to set that foundation for what we're going to talk about here in a second, do you hold any regrets about that early experience?
To some degree, I think I'm paying for the sufferings I inflicted on my teachers. And as a public school teacher now, I'm on the receiving end of it, well, I guess this is karma. This is payback because I did something similar to my teachers growing up. So looking back on it, those are probably the
Hmm.
regrets a lot of the regrets I have are believe it or not are academic.
Hmm.
I mean, I screwed up a lot, and I got caught up in like personal stuff, and then I didn't complete my school when I was supposed to, and I didn't finish my college when I was supposed to, and those are the types of things that I regret. I could have got started in this game a lot sooner
Hmm.
if I had finished when I was supposed to.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that myself. I try to reframe it that I wouldn't be who I am if I hadn't done those things, if I hadn't lived those experiences. It helps me deal with the fact that
Yeah,
I blew off a lot
a
of
double-edged sword.
responsibilities early.
Certainly is a double-edged sword when you reflect on things like that, because on the one hand it kind of carved you into the man that you are, the person that you are. And on the other hand, you think that things would have turned out a lot differently, a lot better
Hmm.
if it hadn't gone the way it did. So, I mean, yeah,
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
we'll never know. It's better that we don't.
No, exactly, exactly. Now, let's shift gears to your life now as an adult, as a professional. That foundation that you had set with the lowered expectations, especially intellectually and scholastically, um, how how does that frame the reality that you have now? You kind of hinted at it right there that you didn't finish your own development on per se a schedule, but also, so how does that affect you as an adult, as a professional now? What have you had to do maybe to compensate or struggle against it you feel others don't? And then I want to kind of lead from that into your creative outlets to kind of deal with that.
I'm a literary guy. I'm a Shakespeare guy. When I went to college, is what I studied. I studied the greatest literary works in history. Um, and I take a lot of pride in that. And one of the writers that I loved and still love is Ernest Hemingway.
Hmm.
Now, clearly, my life was way different than Ernest Hemingway. I didn't come from a wealthy family, but he had the same drive. He had the same infatuation, if you will, with boxing and with bullfighting, and there was this whole notion of friction that drove him. And he took his time. He didn't write a lot of books because he was living life. And I think that's when I turn the pages back on the chapters previous to where I'm at now. I lived a lot.
Hmm.
I did a lot of things. I did a lot of, I have a lot of experiences in the arts. I have a lot of experiences with people, with, music. And I was a musician. I did a lot of crazy things. And, I was like a rock star in some regards. And, I wrote articles for magazines and I met some really cool and famous people. And, I got to have conversations with legends. And I mean, when I turn back and look at some of the things that I've done that has led me here, um, I kind of look at it from a hurt like if I were Hemingway. I didn't have the money Hemingway had, but I certainly had a lot of fun like he did,
Hmm.
and that's why I think I can go to bed at night and with a smile on my face,
And that's a great way to
in
look
spite
at.
of all the frustration.
Yeah, right. And it's a healthy way to look at it too. So, w- how how have you used this to motivate yourself versus allowing it maybe to distract or discourage you from creative pursuits? So, there's a lot of people who will ascribe or subscribe to something like, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and to be where you are in life and also be chasing these creative pursuits like you are, that's a higher level need. Not everybody can get there. A lot of people would stay lower and just try to deal with life. You have used this to at least pursue higher level needs. How did that work? What did you do? What did others do for you that got you into that focused, progressive mindset of I'm going to use this and I'm going to move forward. I'm going to try to achieve. I'm going to shoot for the stars.
Okay, now, Paul, this might be a little difficult for you to configure in your mind because you're a man like I am. Maybe, I don't know. I grew up in my upbringing, because of the nature of the things that I spoke about earlier. I was very protected by my sisters. Okay, so my I was really kind of sheltered by my sisters, and kind of they were like the proxy mom when mom wasn't around. And so I grew up with a very feminist um, view of
Mhm.
the world. Okay, stay with me now. So, of course, I'm very, very fond of my sisters to this day. I mean, we talk, we call each other and whatnot. But I don't think they realize the impact that they had on me, because they probably don't even remember the conversations we had. But I remember asking them, like, because I was always in awe of how they were able to multitask, right? And they would tell me, like, it was really just kind of in their mindset. And so I live in, it's kind of hard for a man, really, because we're very one track minded. We're very narrow and very focused on things. We like to complete projects one at a time. But one of the lessons that I learned from my sisters is the multitasking aspect. And so if you want to be creative and if you want to carry on, your creative projects simultaneously with all your other professional, duties that you have, like what I do, I think women are probably more capable of this, and it's not that it's a sexist thing or anything like that. It's just a realistic thing, in that there are just some people that can multitask better than others, and that's one of the things that I try to do, and I think I perfected it because I do like several projects simultaneously, do them quite fluidly. And that's I think that's really kind of how I'm able to do all of the things that you're talking about, because I'm very, very focused on my professional life. I have everything in order there, and I'm very, very focused also on my creative life, and I have everything in order there, and it's really a page out of my sister's playbook.
That is, again, the support networks again. They're so critical to creatives. They really are. How
Yeah.
easy how easy was it for you to to have that motivation, that inspiration, that support network? At some point, we all take that energy and go and create. What was that like for you? How long did it take you to use these factors in your life to start pursuing? I'm gonna guess that it was probably a lot earlier than I did. I just have a feeling you're gonna answer it like that. But how early in your life did you actually start funneling and or focusing that energy on creative pursuits? And what were they?
Probably the very earliest possible I can think of. Um, this is going way back. We're talking the 70s here. My father bought me a tape recorder, right? Because I had been begging him for one. It's so funny. Like we're talking 2018, 2019 now, and we're talking about audio dramas and podcasting. But when I was a
Yep.
child in the 70s, I had a tape recorder. Okay, and I begged my father to buy me blank tape so that I could record myself and do like all kinds of weird stuff. Of course, looking back on it, it was probably very childish stuff, but I thought it was hysterical. Like I play it over and over again, listening, and I just get just barrels of laugh each time I did it. I was very poetic at a very young age. I was writing a lot in journals. I think I knew my entire life that I was going to be doing something along the lines that I'm doing. I've always known this. And I tell this to my wife. I tell this to everybody that's and that I've always known my entire life that I was going to be exactly where I'm at, in spite of everything that I've said previously. I've always known somewhere in the back of my mind that I would be right here doing exactly
Hmm.
what I'm doing.
That is cool because it's that focus that helps us get through those less than encouraging times when you put something out into the world and you get crickets. That's not necessarily an easy thing to do. So to have a mindset like that is very positive. It's very
I mean,
helpful.
I know I've had conversations with people in my family at a young, and when I was in my early years, and I remember saying, "Oh yeah, probably when I'm in my," they're like, "Well, why don't you write a book or something?" I'm like, "Yeah, probably when I'm in my 40s." I remember being in my 40s, and like I remember thinking I was in my 40s, and I did start writing in my 40s, and I actually published my first book at um, at 45.
Sam lunged as a Chrysler 300 slammed on its brakes, leaving the surface of the road and sliding into the gravel bank where he stood. Seizing pain exploded in his hips at the moment fiberglass and steel met flesh. His legs were no longer his own, unfeeling and useless. The world tumbled. Sky, white earth, clouds, brown boulders poking out of the snow. His legs flopped, arcing over his downward pointed head. And then he landed. The world punched him in the face. Rocks of all sizes, small and tiny, cut into his back, his arms, his face. Sam tumbled over and over before finally crashing into a lawnmower-sized boulder. Radiating warmth in his hip was the only thing that convinced him that he still might actually be alive. Oh my God, I can't move. This excerpt was from my horror anthology, 12 Deaths of Christmas, available in ebook and paperback on Amazon. With that background and with the theme being the low expectations, what kind of reactions have you gotten from the people who know you best about all these creative things that you have accomplished?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of people were surprised. I know my parents were ecstatic. I dedicated my first book to my parents, and I know that my father, I mean, he was so proud of in the book. Look, this is the book my son wrote. Blah 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 blah. You know, my mother was extremely proud. I think her leaving this world, knowing that her son did the things that she always knew that I would do. I think she left this world quite happy and proud of me,
Hmm.
and that just I just words just don't justify how I feel
Right.
about. But I think that was the most. My siblings, yeah, I think that to some degree. I don't know. I don't know about my colleagues or some. Sometimes I think they're a little bit of an awe because I mean we work together, and these are the types of things we always joke about doing. Is yeah, these books that we work with are junk, or why do they keep buying these crappy textbooks, blah blah blah. And so like when I said way back, let's see, I was this book that I wrote, by the way, it took me 6 years to do.
Wow.
I started back in 2009, 2010, and I was so angry and so frustrated with these textbooks that we work with that the director that I worked with at the time, I was like, "Can you get us some good textbooks? These textbooks are no good." So he was jokingly like said, "If you don't like the textbooks, then write your own." And I did.
I love that. I love that.
And then that same director went into the college and purchased the book, and it was the biggest sell that I had. It was just great, man. I'm just
That is awesome.
You know what I mean? I don't know. I think in some regards, there's some colleagues that are real happy for me and real proud of that they work with me and then they know that. And then there's I think the haters that are just be like they just talk under their breath and they say all these negative things about me because he thinks he's so smart and blah blah blah.
Well, yeah,
But whatever.
you've always got you're gonna always have people like that, unfortunately. I mean, if you achieve, there's always got to be somebody there to try to at least knock you down a step or on the rung, or a rung on the ladder, one or two. I don't know what the purpose is besides rationalizing their own behaviors, but yeah, there's always people like that there.
Yeah,
Always.
there are. Yeah, there are. And they think that we don't hear them, but we do.
Yep.
And they think it doesn't bother us, but it does. And it
Oh yeah.
shouldn't, but it does. And it's like, I'm just trying to help.
Yeah.
It's not just about the money. I mean, yeah, sure, that helps. Of course. I mean, the money that I earn from those book sales is really what finances all my creative projects. So the people who want to have creative projects, if there's anything I could tell you, is if you can find a way to use your talents to produce a product that's on a professional level or something that's going to sell, and then you make your money on that, and then the money you earn from that you use to finance your creative projects. That's the way to go, Paul.
Mm-hmm. No, I
That
absolutely
is
agree. I
the
think
way to
that's great
go.
advice. And that actually is a great segue into what I wanted to ask you next, because I wanted to try to, part of the show is empowerment through candor. It's like the tagline of the show, and just having real conversations with writers and with creatives, but that could be helpful in across the spectrum of the audience's life. So, with you in your background and what you've shared today, you're kind of at that point in your life, personally and professionally, where you're influencing people. You're influencing kids at the job, but you're also influencing your peers, parents of kids at the job, and whatnot. But for the listeners, people who may have identified with what you were talking about, with those cultural, social, familial influences early in your life, somebody with a similar experience to that, somebody who isn't in the headspace where you are, meaning they're not in a healthy headspace necessarily, where you're so focused, so driven, so achieving, what would be your tips, tools, and tactics for them? What could be a general piece of advice for people who feel maybe disempowered for whatever reason it may be, where they could actually emulate the steps that you've taken?
Well, not everybody is good at selling themselves or selling a product,
Mm-hmm.
and that's fair. Okay, because I know that one of the careers that I've had in my past was I was a salesman. So for me, the art of the pitch is really something that I got good at. It's when you can write a phenomenal book, you can write a phenomenal story, you can whatever it is that you're doing, you can do phenomenally. But if you don't have somebody to sell it for you, or for you yourself to sell it, because I did it all myself, um, that's gonna be the major challenge that you're gonna have. So try to make a plan, find product or the book. You know,
Hmm.
if you're gonna sell, if I don't know, I think you're like I did self publishing because I already had clientele lined up. So I didn't really need. I knew I was going to be my own representative in that field, and so that worked out fine for me.
Hmm.
Now, as it's funny you're asking me that question, because it's sort of what I'm kind of piecing together right now as a strategy, how the strategy goes for it. I'm going to approach it the same way. It's really how we got to even be in this position in the first place. It's why we're even talking, because the whole point of us talking was my involvement in the audio drama. The
Hmm.
audio drama was designed and created specifically to garner interest in the story of the book, of the novel that I have yet to put out.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yep. Oh,
So
I
like
know.
if there's a way to put the feelers, if you will, of to see what the market would look like, to see if there would be any interest, to see if there would be any fan base for whatever it is you're doing. Podcasting is a great way to do it.
Mhm.
Um, that's what I'm doing, and I think that's what you're doing too, Paul, if I'm
Oh
not
yeah.
mistaken.
Yep.
So it's like, yeah, I mean, we're doing we're doing it in a way to where it's not just dipping your big toe in the water to test the water. You're kind of dipping your whole foot in,
Hmm.
you know.
I really want to get to the podcast, and obviously I want to hear your horrible writing experience. But I do want to because I think this is something we have to do routinely, because there's just a lot of barriers out there and a lot of toxicity out there, and you're a really positive spirit. So, what would be, with your background? You're Mexican American. You said that from the beginning. So,
Mhm.
other people who feel they can look at you, and they somebody looking at your show now or in a year, the book, or whenever the book's going to come out, they might not always tie it back to struggles, strifes, and a bunch of hard work that you did to get there. So what kind of message would you leave somebody who feels voiceless, who feels disenfranchised or disempowered, to encourage them that, hey, JV didn't just fall into this. I worked hard to get here. You can too. What would you say to that person?
All the negativity that they feel, whether it's internal or external, has to become your motivation, because we're going to face, and I say this as just speaking as a minority, we're going to face discrimination at every turn. It just comes with the territory, you
Hmm.
know. I think at some point we all develop, and I mean, I'm speaking of minorities, I think. Um, we all develop at some point, some kind of shield or some kind of way to protect ourselves internally from those things that are very hurtful. Um, and sometimes we get rejected before we're even given a chance, for
Hmm.
whatever reasons. Oh, last name Torres. Throw that one in the pile.
Yep.
It's a sad reality. Um, but anyone who's in this situation I'm in, and I speak to quite a bit actually, um, there are networks of others like yourselves. You know, they're out there. I'm out here. There's ways to network, and there are conferences of every sort. There's probably, and I don't know if this is true, but I'm throwing it out there. There's probably a conference on conferences somewhere.
If
There's
there's not, there will be now.
conferences of all. There's the ballpoint pen conference coming up this fall. Whatever it is that your interest is, you find the conference, and that's the best place to go network. It might cost you a few bucks, but it's worth it,
Hmm.
because that's the only way you're going to meet other people like yourself.
Yep. No, and that's you've got to do well. Okay, so at this point, if this is your first time listening to the show, welcome. Glad to have you here, and I hope you stick around for the long time term. But I'm about to ask JV for a horrible writing experience. Now, you may, if you're brand new, you don't know why I'm doing this. If you've listened before, you know what's coming. Bear with me. For new listeners, the reason I'm asking JV to give us a horrible writing experience is not to embarrass him or bring up ugly past or anything like that. It's actually to help you. The reason is JV's already told you He's got a couple professional books out. He's got a fiction book on the way out, and he already has numerous episodes of his audio drama out. He has achieved and is achieving. I don't know what he's about to share, but buried in his experience is a lesson for all of us, a lesson of perseverance, of dedication, of drive, whatever it may be. We're about to find out. But that's why I'm asking him for this. So, JV, with that little lead in, what is your horrible writing experience?
Okay, I'll share one with you. It's horrible, but it's not that horrible. But it's pretty mortifying to me. Now, the first run of the book, the textbook, I want to learn English. It's the title of the book. The college purchased the first run of it, right? And when they bought the books in, it's funny because like this is the one thing when you work with academics. There's always going to be grammar nerds, right?
Yeah.
And if you don't know the difference between compliment and compliment, one with an I and one with an E, clearly I didn't know the difference. It was brought to my attention by one of my colleagues after they had already purchased the book.
Oh, no.
And I was mortified. And she's like, "Do you know that was this a typo?" And of course, I blamed it on the ubiquitous editor that didn't exist because I was the editor. And I was like, I was like, "Oh well, you know, they must have made a mistake, and we'll correct it for the next run." And I did correct it, but oh my god, talk about uh, you know, feeling the sweat on your neck and the on the back of your shirt. You know, it was just it was really embarrassing.
And it can be, and it can discredit, especially something like that. I've screwed up in fiction, but to have a professional book out there and have something like that, yeah, that could actually have severe consequences beyond just personal embarrassment.
Sure, it was, and I think because it was the first run, it wasn't like 1,000 books or anything like that. But it was enough to where she kind of like came me over and says, It's an honest mistake." I said, "We'll correct it right away." Blah blah blah, and I did correct it right away. But man,
Yeah. Yeah.
so like there's like 150 or 200 books out there with that mistake.
Oh
Well,
man. And yet you still persevered and carried on and kept producing. See, folks, it's all about you're gonna listeners, if you're not published yet, you will publish because you're listening to this show and I'm not gonna let you go until you do publish. But you will release a book into the world that has something silly in it. I guarantee you.
yeah.
You keep pressing. You laugh about. Matter of fact, just to share this, this will be the first time I share this. JV, you're not alone. It took, thankfully, the paperback wasn't out yet. The ebook was on pre-order, but nobody gets to download it until Amazon releases it. Thankfully, because 12 Deaths of Christmas was out on pre-order for about 2 months before my cover artist wrote me on Facebook one day and she said, "Hey, dumbass." And then she sent me a screenshot. The screenshot was of the electronic file of the book, and I had spelled my own name wrong in the contact page. I swear, man.
That might be worth something someday, Paul.
I know, right? Oh, so hey, we all do it. We all do it. And JV, thank you for sharing that. Now let's talk about the show. What is okay? Well, I don't want to drive your conversation because I want you to highlight what you want to highlight. But I long for audio drama that has a fresh story. I feel like I'm guilty of it with horror shows. I feel like
Mhm.
the horror genre, everything is been done to death. Sci-fi, same thing. Everybody's doing the same thing over and over again. And then all of a sudden, drops in my lap because of Twitter. I happen to see your show. Talk to us about The Rise of King Asilas. What's it about? What motivated you to step into that hornet's nest?
Well, we live in a country that's a hotbed for all kinds of polarizing politics, right?
Yes.
And I'm a history guy. I love history and I love alternate history shows and that sort of thing. But really, when I set out to do this, it actually goes back. It goes back to my research in linguistics. I have a lot of research that I do with linguistics, and um, I was trying to find a correlation if there was a intonation change between how people speak now and how people spoke back when in the early days of CBS radio. I'm going somewhere with this, okay?
I trust you.
And in that research I was doing, right, the storylines were very. I started listening to the original audio dramas like back in the old days, like back when it was detective radio and before television. Those audio dramas, the
Mhm.
classic ones, and I started to notice something that was happening. There was these larger than life stories, the War of the Worlds. I mean, they're just a larger than life story that were just they transcended the generations and are still with us to this day. And so I said, I want to write a story. It can't be just a story of something that's mundane, or not that there's anything wrong with stories like that. I said, but I wanted a story that was going to be so big that it was going to be bigger than any story out there. I said, well, what would be the one thing that could shake everything up? I said, well, then, there was the whole Donald Trump thing had come out. People were comparing him to, dictator or a king or whatnot. But even before then, people were saying that about Obama too.
Mhm.
And so I was thinking, what about if America changed from having a president to actually having a king? You know, like for real, like Henry VIII type stuff. The guy will just like kill you. you know. So that was kind of what set this whole wheel in motion. And once my creative juices started, once I sunk my teeth, I'm like a pit bull. Once I clamp down on something, I don't let go.
Mhm.
And so I just kind of let this story just grow and grow, and it just kind of ballooned to. I say, well, why stop with just being king of America? How about being king of the entire world?
And there's a lot. I mean, I don't want you to ruin any or give any spoilers that you don't want to give or anything along those lines. For myself included as a listener, right? So I don't want you to ruin it for me either.
No, but I also want to give you something that you're not going to get. I mean, like if anybody listens to the show, listens to my show as well, they're going to learn something from my interview with you that they're not going to get anywhere else.
Right, right. And
That's, I'm hoping I can give a couple of nuggets, so don't worry about that.
all
Go
right,
ahead.
nuggets are awesome because let me see if I can ask it safely so it doesn't ruin anything for me. It seems like it's growing, like the world and the story's growing. How much more growing are you gonna do? And are we gonna get are we gonna get our closure in the audio drama, or is this gonna be like a crossover where we've got to go toward maybe a novel in the future to see where the story leads?
I do plan on writing more than one novel. I do
Okay.
plan on it being a much larger story. What you have to, and if you haven't picked up on this yet, Paul, I hope after this, in the next when you listen to it again, it'll dawn on you. When the narrator is telling the story, he is telling it in the past tense, which
Mm-hmm.
means that King of Silas and everything that's happened in the story has already happened.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's your first nugget. Everything that's going on in the show already happened. So we're already this. The very narration of this story takes place long after he's gone.
Okay.
Okay, so that should give you one indication that this takes place. Actually, what's taking place is something far in the future, or at least far enough to where it's America and King of Size and all this is all gone. So you're asked like without giving too much away, where is this all going? To me, there's only one other book. There's only one other book that could possibly tell a much bigger story, and that's the Bible. If the Bible is the ceiling, then that's where I'm going.
Okay. So you're shooting like on epic proportions here.
Oh yes, this is an epic story. At the end of season two, because I've already one of the things I set out to do over the summer, Paul, was write out the entire season. That's something I didn't do in the first season. So I wrote out the entire season. So I have these really big storyboards on my wall they kind of occupied my living room for the entire summer. So at the end of season two will absolutely blow your mind.
Okay.
That's my goal, and that's where I'm headed.
That's actually I don't know how you did that first season then without having everything written out. I know there are a number of people who do that in audio drama. I don't know how they do. right as they go kind of stuff. I just couldn't do it.
Multitasking, man,
And
multitasking.
there we go. So what plans do you have then? What can we expect from you in the future?
Well, I will tell you that this past weekend I was speaking to an amateur film, not an amateur filmmaker, but a small independent filmmaker in DC, and we're gonna do a 5 minute film based on the audio drama. Probably we're working on the script right now. Probably after the holidays, so sometime between now and the season finale, which will be in May, we're going to put out this 5 minute film that is based on the story of
That
the
is
Kent Rising
so
themselves. So
cool.
that's what we're. That's the one because that's a big production for me. Like I mean, yeah, I sell a lot of books, but man, I don't make that kind of money. Like I
Right.
can't finance a film. But so it's like so the guy's like, well, what's your budget and blah blah. I'm like, slow down, buddy, slow down. You like the story, you're into it, I'm into it. Let's work. Let's work with what we got. The same type of budget we're working with for the audio drama.
There we go. That is
Yeah,
really neat. That is really cool.
yeah, because a lot of people like to do patrons and then Patreon, and they like to do like all these other things, and they don't have the luxury that I have, which is I basically have this other entity that finances it, so
Right.
I don't have to worry about trying to do a Kickstarter or any of that stuff.
Right. So are you going to leave this world for anything in the future, or are you pretty much dedicated to this world, this story for the foreseeable future?
Let me put it to you this way. As I mentioned early on, when I was a small child, my father gave me a tape recorder. So technically I've been podcasting my entire life. There's no way that I'm ever going to give up podcasting.
That is
I've always
cool.
done it. In high school I used to do a comedy show. If any of my family are listening to this, they'll know exactly what I'm talking about. I had this comedy show in high school, and I would tape record and I would get like all these characters, and I would do like Ronald Reagan, and I had all these other weird characters, and I would play this really bad accent, Italian accent,
Oh god.
I would do like all like these really stupid, juvenile, goofy jokes, and I would distribute them to my friends in school.
Love it.
The years before, this is we're talking about the '80s, long before podcasting. So I guess that was a caveman version of podcasting. Basically, I'd give them like tapes, they'd listen to them, and then they'd pass it on to the next friend, and then they'd pass it on to the next friend.
Do they
Yeah,
you remember these kids these days, they don't know how good they've got it. Remember back in the
I
day when
know.
you would dub somebody's tape that had already been dubbed, so like the
Yeah.
quality degraded with each copy?
You can barely hear the music in the
Yeah.
background.
It's so true. Oh, see, you millennials, this is why we really don't like you, because you've got it made. You've never had to live through the analog era.
Yeah, but we came up with some creative stuff though, Paul. I know that I came up with some really cool stuff.
Oh yeah.
Like the back on it, man. I got really creative. So when I would record something, instead of it being muted, it would be like,
Yep.
you know.
You had to
And
be.
that was
You
like my
actually had to be.
demonic voice.
Yeah, I don't want to ruin stuff for folks for the show, but I love the story. I love the arc. I love the supernatural elements. I'll put it that way. I love the supernatural elements that you've gone into because, again, I feel that there's just been a void of that kind of stuff out there. So I was glad to actually see it. It's really neat, and I'm glad to hear that it's not going away anytime soon. Before I ask you for your contact information, do you have a timeline for us for anything that might be in the book form?
It's funny you mentioned that. My wife is probably the one person who is the most anxious for this project to be done, for the book to be done. And she's actually told me because I do a lot of theater reviews, and we do every weekend. I'm out doing theater. She's like, "You're gonna stop doing theater reviews for a while." I'm like, "I am." She's like, "Yes, because you have to finish the book. Enough is enough."
I love it.
I mean, how many we love Shakespeare? I love Shakespeare. Like I get it every chance I get to go see a Shakespeare play. Well, yesterday I went to go see Joshua Bell. Have you ever heard of him? The
I have
violinist.
no, I have not.
Oh, I heard him play with a symphony here at the Meyerhoff Symphony Hall. I'm always going to these shows. I'm very culturally in tune with what's going on. I'm telling you, it's like so. I'm like, okay, 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 okay. So I'm gonna give up. I'm gonna put the theater thing on hold for a while, and I'm just gonna devote every minute I can to finish it because I'm about halfway done. So we're looking at. I was hoping to do it before the holidays, Paul, but I'm looking like a spring release.
Oh, there you go. There's not that's totally fine because that'll line out with the end of the season, right? So it
Yeah,
should fall in nice.
I'm gonna try for the season finale, to sell the book for the season finale, and then over the summer, and then that'll also get people who crave it because I get a lot of messages over the summer. Like over the summer, people are like, "Man, when are you gonna put out another one?" I'm like, "Didn't you listen to Halloween? Hello." So it's like, yeah, for people who can't wait, they can read the book.
There you go. And it's just neat, anyways, to have it in a different medium. It really is. And as a creative, you've got to be enjoying that.
I'm so like surprised that it was some of the feedback that I gotten and some of the people that message me with stuff, questions, and they catch things,
Oh yeah.
and that just like I couldn't I had no idea that it was gonna. I was hoping for like when it happens, it's like I don't know. It does kind of humble me. It humbles me anyway.
No, it is. It's really humbling to share that stuff and then have people react positively to it. It hopefully all of us are humbled by it. I'm sure there are some people that get carried away with themselves, but for the most part, it's really cool when somebody actually validates your love for a concept, an idea, a story. It really is. So, JV, now that you have shared so much of yourself and we've talked about the awesome audio drama, Rise of King Asilas, where and how can people find you and find more information?
Well, we're on Twitter at King of Silas, Facebook the same at King of Silas. The rise of King of Silas.com is our main website. We get a lot of traffic there. You can when I get a chance, I'm always updating with blogs. Anybody who likes the show, who wants the transcripts are on there too. And if you want to know, like if you missed something or if you didn't to read what's going on, all the transcripts are online at our website, theriseofkingofsilas.com. You can contact me through there as well. I'm always putting stuff up there. You can listen to all the episodes on there. It's just that's our hub. That's our main place.
Perfect. Perfect. And I do want to thank you for coming on and talking about this and sharing all of JV's story, all the way back from back in the day when he was a wee lad. I really appreciate it because I've enjoyed what you've put out there in the world. I've been dying to chat with you, and this topic I thought was spot on, and it can definitely be an inspiration for a lot of people, JV. So thank you for coming on.
No, thank you, Paul, for letting me come on here and for sharing the content with your listeners. And
This has been Horrible Writing, and hopefully after this episode, you suck less than you did at the beginning. I am Paul Sading, your host extraordinaire. You can find me over on the Twitterverse at Writing Horrible and over at paulsading.com/horrible-writing. Until next time, suck less.